a new subject for us here in Montana. In fact, I don't know that we heard a lot about this, particularly in the public arena, much before about Christmas time. And then since Christmas, this has really kind of gotten to be a real hot topic issue in Montana. So it's a relatively new issue for Montanans. There's a lot we don't know about it, and that's what the intention of what we're doing here is let's bring some experts. Let's talk about the facts. Let's turn the rhetoric down. Let's turn the temperature down on this thing and just get educated on this. And so part of that effort here today is like I'm thrilled to introduce Tanner Avery, policy director for the Frontier Institute. And Tanner's been spending a lot of time on this issue, kind of from a global perspective, looking at data centers generally, and some of the pros and cons associated with data centers. And so Tanner's going to give us kind of more of a holistic approach overview of data centers, what they could mean for Montana. And I'll turn this over to Tanner. And again, as soon as he's finished with his presentation, we'll shut the recording off. And I encourage folks to jump in with questions or to type questions into the chat box. We'll unmute you if you want to ask a question in person, and we'll go from there. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Tanner. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time and bringing your experience and expertise on this subject to this webinar.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. Here, go ahead and share my little presentation. All right. Yeah, as Todd said, I am Tanner Avery. I'm the policy director of the Frontier Institute. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit think tank that focuses exclusively on Montana. And so for those who don't know what a think tank is, I think it's always good to have some perspective. We basically get to study problems. I spend a lot of time my free time thinking about things and then coming up with potential solutions that we work with communities, individuals, and businesses to adopt policies that ideally protect our freedoms, encourage economic opportunity, and protect the things that make Montana great. So the data center one has been very much on my mind. Funny enough, actually, I think I'm one of, I've been talking about data centers for probably 3 years. I think 2023 is when I first started doing presentations about it. We kind of saw the writing at the wall, and that's kind of the benefit of being a think tank is we get to see, oh, there's some national trends here. There's some international trends as well too. So we've put a lot of thought into it, and so I'm looking forward to discussing. Before I get crazy though, I want to kind of just recap a little bit with everyone on what the previous presentations have been. We've talked about electricity, water use, permitting, community impact, and revenue and education, as well as one yesterday too that I don't have on here. What my conversation today is going to be a lot more of though is just really zooming out. Being a think tank, we can really take a 10,000-foot view and then look into specifics, but also zoom out and see what's the context here. So that's my goal today. So a little recap here as well. I want to kind of just briefly touch on some of the things that I got as takeaways from previous presenters. And the thing that I actually really enjoyed about previous presenters is they did a really good job of to kind of breaking down the details, but doing it in a way that isn't over the top. Data centers aren't a cure-all by any means, and so we should approach these with a grain of salt and clear eyes. So a little recap here. We learned that most evidence shows data centers can reduce electricity rates for other ratepayers. It's a really good news, quite frankly. But that's not always the case. There are some examples when it does harm ratepayers. So we want to make sure we protect ratepayers. But luckily, Montana has some really good laws on the books, and paying attention to other states, they're actually pointing to Montana and saying, hey, we should do what they have to protect ratepayers, existing ratepayers from data centers. So that's a really good development. Next one would be most modern water-cooled data centers use closed loop. They fill up with water once, maybe twice, and then they're good for years, if not a decade or more. Really good news. I'm going to dive more into the specifics there because statistics get a little bit misleading there. And so kind of just unpacking that will be good. But that's not always the case. There's tons of different types of data centers. One of the ones that I like to point to that a lot of stats get pulled from is actually from the Nordic countries in Northern Europe. They have a data center that is built right on the ocean. And so they are using exclusively water cooled and they're bringing in water constantly. Obviously, that is not Montana. Not by any means are we going to have that. It just wouldn't be physically possible. But two, it just doesn't pencil out. And so looking at these a little bit carefully will be good. The next one is data centers go through extensive permitting processes to ensure environmental protections and public hearings. So when we hear about a data center being proposed, it's not the end all be all. We're going to have plenty of opportunities to give feedback and to weigh in on these things. It's really good news. The honest caveat there is that that means that our communities need to have really good conversations about the pros and the cons. Data centers often bring significant jobs, both construction and long-term operations. But the caveat there is it differs. Every facility is different. A small data center is going to bring a few jobs, a big one's going to bring a bunch of jobs, and it changes based on what type of data center they are. So the specifics matter there for sure. And then lastly, data centers generate substantial property tax revenue and frequently give back directly to communities. So that was a really good presentation that the chamber had, I think a couple weeks ago. But definitely go back and watch those. These are all on YouTube. But the honest caveat there is, well, every jurisdiction's different. Tax rates change. So how they participate in communities is going to change quite a bit. So the honest takeaway I got from these previous presentations are one, data centers are a big opportunity for Montana. Two, they are not a magic cure-all by any means or stretch of the imagination, and they're not without trade-offs. So we should be looking at all of those things. What's my interest in data centers? You heard a little bit about what I do at Frontier Institute, but my spoiler here is I don't really care about data centers. I care about any industry or business that wants to increase economic opportunity in Montana. Data centers is just the most, relevant conversation right now. So we should look at these things and weigh them out. How should we approach data centers? This is kind of the way that we at Frontier Institute and myself personally look at this. First of all, we should treat them like any other business that want to do business in Montana. We should welcome them, but if there are harms or problems or anything there, we should address those. What that means is no special carve-outs or free rides. Just like every other business, they have to participate in our economy. They don't get a special carve-out or anything like that, and so we should apply those same rules. We should be honest about trade-offs. There are real positives and real negatives. We should acknowledge both. And then when we see negatives or issues that might arise, we should address them as problems to solve. There's a lot of good opportunities for Montana. We don't want to rob ourselves of positives by just saying we can't address the negatives. And the good news is we have a lot of these tools already on the books that states are literally pointing to us and saying, hey, Montana's got it right. And we have data centers already, but we don't have a ton. So it's cool that we're ahead of the curve there for sure. Overview of what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to kind of use the approach of we're zooming out, and then we're zooming out again. So the first thing we're going to dive into is what physical data center infrastructure enables. That's going to be on the ground in Montana. What the data centers themselves enable, which we're going to have a little conversation about AI, everyone's favorite topic right now. And then I'm going to zoom out even further, and we're going to say, why does this matter in the context of where we're at globally right now? All right, so some background here before I kind of make some points. This is very nerdy, so bear with me, but I think some really good points to be made here. So industries tend to cluster together. This is something that I think we all innately know, but we don't necessarily always think of. So a great example in Bozeman, where I live, photonics. They're all over the place. I think we have the highest density of photonics companies in the world, I believe, right now in the Gallatin Valley. Small businesses on Main Street, finance in New York, tech in Silicon Valley, vehicles, Detroit, energy, oil and gas, that kind of thing in Houston, music in Nashville, it's no surprise, semiconductors in Taiwan. So these are all examples of industry clustering together. The question is why? Why are industries kind of clustering together? And it kind of, it's for a long time we didn't really know. We thought, oh well, maybe like one place has a strategic advantage, and in some ways that's true, but in other ways it actually is that an industry arrives, they say, hey, we want to set up shop here for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's quality of life. Sometimes it's access to resources, you name it. And then other industries show up close by and it grows from there. The supply chain increases. Now you have people moving there. to work and be part of this ecosystem. Hence, if someone wants to work in tech, they pretty much got to go to Silicon Valley. It's changed a little bit. Same if you want to be a musician, you got to go spend some time in Nashville for sure. So what that enables is lower costs, more talent, faster innovation, shared infrastructure. So it kind of acts like a magnet, is the way I would think about it. Of when these ecosystems grow, they start to attract more and more people. Why does that matter? Why am I even talking about this at all? And how does it relate to data centers? So, Montana has some really amazing things where we have a supply chain for a 21st century economy already here. We have amazing critical minerals. I don't think that's a secret to anyone. We do have some chip manufacturing in Montana. We also have high tech photonics, which can be used to create chip manufacturing. And then at the very end of this supply chain, the 21st century economy would be data centers. So when I think about data centers, I don't just think, oh, we should, attract data centers for the sake of data centers. I'm thinking that when we can attract parts of this supply chain, we can attract the entire supply chain. That is the goal. That's my interest with data centers specifically. I would love to be able to have Montana minerals used or mined in Montana, put into chips and then used in a data center here so we can export our energy globally. So that's kind of the goal and my interest there. One common response I get, we don't want to replace current industries. Unbelievably fair. I think that is a really good critique. And my answer to that is we shouldn't, and I don't think we have to. The reason why I want to attract some of these industries, the 21st century economy, as I phrased it, is because Montana has had a lot of industry leave. And this really isn't a secret. You look at a lot of the different industries, like we're a very heavy tourist economy today. There's pros and cons to that, but looking back, we've had other types of economies, and luckily today we've got stronger environmental regulations. We've got a more active public that wants protections. So we can kind of bring back some of the industry that we've lost over the last 100 years, and this time we can do it right. The next one is building a more diverse economy. We've all lived through 2008, the COVID pandemic. Things happen, and it can be really hard for local areas to address concerns if a factory goes out for a while, a mill closes, and there's nothing else in that community. I want strong towns. And so when we have a little bit more diversification, it enables us to weather hard times and to support our neighbors as we go through those hard times. Lastly, the one that's really near and dear to my heart is keeping our kids in Montana. This has been something that we can actually go back and, if you're nerdy like me and you spend your time reading historical newspapers from the late 1800s and early 1900s, you will see routinely they talk about our kids are leaving the state for, you name it, for opportunities. And over time it's changed quite a bit, but the common one is they're going to the coasts for other opportunities. And so what you'd see a lot of is the hollowing out of America, hollowing out of Montana specifically. Another word we use today is called brain drain. We're losing our kids. And so what I would love for Montana to have is the opportunity for kids to stay and take over the family ranch. But if they don't want to do that, they have other opportunities. If they want to go work in tech, they can go do that. Or if they want to work in healthcare, they can go do that. That is really the goal. Especially as I'm engaged right now, getting married soon. And we're thinking about kids. It's like, I want my kids to be close to me. I want them to stay in the state as much as possible. So we should enable opportunity and protect what makes Montana Montana. It's not about replacement by any means. It's about building a stronger state. So with this, I want to just address a couple things about physical data center infrastructure statistics. I'm not going to get too into the weeds here, but this is really good tools that folks can use to kind of look whether someone's arguing for data centers or against data centers. What should we look for? How should we know whether someone is stretching the truth here? So my favorite one is watch for up to statistics. They're often very misleading. So my favorite one, we've done a little research at Frontier Institute about this, and that is a data center can use up to 5 million gallons of water a day. Okay, that is factually true that some data centers can use 5 million gallons of water a day. But what that doesn't tell us was when that study was done, was that taken from the hottest day of the year? Or do usually they use 1,000 gallons or something like that. So watch for those and ask some critical questions and say, well, what does up to mean? The next one is when comparing dollar values over years, make sure it's inflation adjusted. We need to make sure that when we're talking about specifically energy rates and how they change over time, and when we're comparing Montana's energy rates with other states, the biggest thing that I see is that they're not inflation adjusted. And so we don't have a really good gauge for how much does it actually cost us in today's dollars, because inflation went through the roof. And so today's money, unfortunately, is not as much is worth as much today as it was a few years ago. That's a side conversation, but watch for those things because they can really skew statistics really easily. The third one would be when discussing gallons used, ask if it's the same water used over and over again. This kind of goes to the closed loop system. Going back to the 5 million gallons, I could say, hey, this data center uses 1,000 gallons or 5 million gallons or whatever it might be. But oftentimes it's a closed loop. They're using the same water over and over and over. So I can say statistically, it's going to be true. They're using X number of gallons a day. But if it's the same water, that means something substantially different. Fourth would be compare numbers with something you're familiar with for context. So in Montana, we're a ranching and farming state. So I would say compare to what you use. Or another one that I think is pretty relevant is to golf courses, to restaurants, something that we're familiar with on a daily basis, because numbers are really abstract. It's really hard for people, including myself, to tie it to something concrete. So find something to relate it to in context. And then last one, this one is a really tricky one, which I've seen used routinely in this whole debate, is when someone's making a claim, ask what assumptions are built into that estimate. This can go any direction, but I'll use an example of one that we see pretty commonly, which is when we're talking about gallons of water used. Oftentimes, they will bake into that number what we would call like upstream and downstream impacts. So most people hear that number and they go, oh, you're going to use X number of gallons on that site. That's not necessarily true. A lot of these statistics are actually reaching out to the energy generation. And oftentimes it's in other states or it's other parts where there is more water abundance. So we should be careful about that. And then the third trickiest part about that is I think it's not quite fair, but they will sometimes include water used for the entire supply chain. So if we are talking about the water used to create microchips, and we're getting those microchips from, say, Taiwan, who is very water abundant, they're on an island. That's going to be very, very different when we have those realized. All right, so zooming out even further, I want to just address kind of what I'm calling the elephant in the room, which is AI. So we all know data centers do a lot of things: store family photos, health records, financial data, connect customers and businesses worldwide, Netflix, you name it. The elephant in the room is they also power AI. Now, I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily, but I do think that artificial intelligence and how quickly this is developed, especially in the eyes of people who don't work on this on a daily basis, it gives us a little anxiety. And I think that's why we're having these conversations around data centers in a way that when Google built out their cloud servers back in the 2010s, no one really blinked an eye. And I think it's because people didn't really care, quite frankly, because it was, you're storing my family photos and medical records. Now we're talking about artificial intelligence. Suddenly it is a bigger issue. So I want to just give some context of what AI means to Montana, because it's really hard to differentiate between data centers and an AI. My caveat there is that is not any guarantee that data centers in Montana that will be built or ones that are currently in Montana are using these data centers for AI. They might not. So we should have those conversations. But a little background here: with every technology, there is hype and there's doom. There are a lot of opinions and there's a lot of hyperbole of people saying this is the answer to all of our problems and this is the worst thing that's ever happened. So I've got some examples here of the telephone, the printing press, and then the internet. So if we look at the telephone, it definitely changed how people connected, but it didn't replace human connection. We still chat with each other. We still have communities. The printing press, it definitely expanded knowledge, but also created new societal disruption. So the third one, the internet, it's become essential infrastructure, but the real benefits and real problems do exist. And I think we can all think of a few of those as well too. So as time tells, the truth is always somewhere in the middle. The example of kind of this hype and doom cycle here in Montana that's really pertinent is if, like I said, if you go and read historical newspapers like I do in my free time, you'll have something called bicycle face. All right, well, what even is that? So in the late 1800s, early 1900s, bicycles were invented. They were all the rage, and so you had bicycle clubs coming around. People were very, excited about them. This is gonna, we don't need horses anymore. We can just all bicycle around. And well, obviously that this certainly didn't happen. Cars came around, so we knew that wasn't true. But at the same time, people were very concerned about that. And so the term bicycle face popped up all over the place because people were worried that the speed at which bicycles move physically changed our facial structures. And so there's some really funny quotes from Butte and of people talking about how this is going to disform us and how this is going to change biology forever. And so it's a really good example of there's hype and there's doom. People who are inventors aren't always the best predictors of what their invention will mean. And that doesn't mean that they're not making incredible things that we should look at, but it does mean that we should take a little bit with a grain of salt. The same is true with AI. There are some doomsday predictions. There are some utopian predictions. On the doomsday side, we definitely hear things like jobs eliminated, society destabilized, existential risk to humanity. I don't think any of us are, we all see these on a daily basis. At the other side, I definitely have seen some things of what I would consider to be utopian, which is that AI will make it so we never have to work again. We're going to have everything's going to be free. Everyone's going to be free to go and paint and to do whatever they want. Everything's going to be solved. If we're really honest here, the truth is a whole lot more in the middle and a whole lot less cool. We are going to see some great things come from this, but it's not going to be unbelievably game changing, to be quite frank with you. So, what does this mean for Montana specifically? So, AI is democratizing information. It's a really fancy way to say that people have access to information who didn't have access to information before. So, if you think about it, large operations or corporations for that matter had tons of data. And so they hired teams of consultants and analysts who could turn raw data into decisions. AI makes it so that your average everyday small business can do the same thing. The important thing there too is you're using hyper-specific information to make decisions. So I have examples of small farmers, ranchers, and then the one that I'm going to really speak about though is small timber and mill operators. This has been a business that has been slowly going out of business in Montana. It's been really struggling. It's an important part of our economy. It's an important part of forest management. But what AI can do and what the large timber mills have gotten really good at is maximizing every single inch of that timber, whether it's grading, cutting, inventory logistics, market decisions on what is high price right now, what they should be making. All those decisions can increase profitability 1, 2, 3, 5%. Even those small things, if we can make farming, ranching, timber operations increase their profitability by a few percent, that is a huge deal, and that goes a long ways, and it enables the small people, the everyday people that are running small businesses to compete with giant corporations. And that is a absolute game changer, especially in Montana. When used well, AI can make every hour worked more profitable. So kind of the same point here. The nerdy part about this is what economists call labor productivity. And in short, it's the amount of goods or economic value produced per hour of labor. If we look back in history, it's one of the most powerful drivers of wages, living standards, and long-term prosperity. It's why the Industrial Revolution increased prosperity so drastically and brought down costs so much. If you go back all the way back to fire, we see the same thing. Unfortunately, Montana has one of the lowest labor productivity rates in the nation. This is a little bit outdated, but the general trend is still the same. This is from 2022, and we're in the bottom 5, I believe. Then we might have gone up a little bit, but this does not mean that people aren't working their butts off. In fact, it means that we're working our butts off so much that we're not getting the amount of money for our work that we should be getting. That's what it is. Montanans are hardworking, and that's really what this is showing. One of the biggest reasons for this actually is our largest industries face lower labor productivity rates. So this is a snapshot of our biggest industries. You'll see trade, healthcare, leisure activities, business services as some of the biggest ones. And our next slide here, we'll see where they fall in terms of labor productivity. On the far right side, you'll see healthcare, trade, leisure activities. Those are some of our biggest industries. They're also either middle of the pack or low in the pack in terms of the amount of money that they can make for hours put into that work. If we could bump up all of these, $1,000, $10,000, that goes a really long way, and it allows us to compete not just nationally, but internationally as well. So that's a really good thing that we should be considering, and we should not undersell, especially because a lot of these industries aren't the industries that are being replaced. Quite frankly, a lot of white collar jobs are, in theory, being replaced. But I will tell you what, healthcare, agriculture, leisure activities, camping and that kind of thing, and supplying those industries aren't going to be replaced by AI anytime soon, but AI can help make them more profitable. We are, without a doubt, one of the best states to positioned to benefit from AI. I think that's, it's not too much of a stretch because of the makeup of our industry. These industries face lower labor productivity rates. I just kind of went over this a little bit too. So these are the industries where AI won't really replace jobs, but it'll make them more valuable. It'll make our time used in these industries more productive. Agriculture, timber, tourism, healthcare, you name it.
Hmm.
Zooming out even further here, I want to put this into context of why, like I said, I've been talking about data centers for 3 years, maybe a little bit longer. Why now? What is happening that all of a sudden we're talking about data centers and AI? And to be frank, I think this is our space race. I think that this isn't just a competition between, OpenAI and Elon Musk. Like, this is something that is international. This is a global competition, and the stakes are very, very high, especially when we look at what a world would look like differently. So if China wins, obviously the Chinese Communist Party is very much intertwined with all of their AI companies. You can actually go online. I encourage everyone to do this and find one of these companies and use those AIs and compare to American AI. You will be very shocked and a little bit scared. Things like Tiananmen Square massacre, the Hong Kong democracy movement, the Uyghur human rights abuses, completely censored. They largely don't even acknowledge they ever existed. Now, imagine if China was the group that ran and created the internet versus America. There would be some consequences to that. Our American values would have no seat at the table, and we'd be looking at things a lot differently. On the other side of the coin, though, is if America wins this AI race, which require data centers, we're going to have multiple companies competing with each other. We're already seeing that today. That enables for ideological diversity. That is what I love. I think that we should be able to find an AI that says, okay, I lean a little bit more this way, or I lean a little more this way, and they should compete and say, well, what's better? And that's a really good thing. No single person or government controls the information layer, the thing that makes AI possible. And one of my favorites is American values are going to be baked into this, at least to some extent, and it's because people building it are in America. Free expression, due process, free markets are built into the foundation. And the most beautiful thing is the rest of the world has options, not just a communist China AI, if you will. That does not mean, I don't think that's a case for why Montana has to do it by any means. So I think zooming out, we get that perspective. We go, well, here's what's happening. That doesn't mean Montana has to build data centers. I don't think it's a good case for why Montana must build data centers, but it does put it in perspective. If we want America to win, someone in America has to build these data centers. And if we can address the negatives or externalities from data centers, we can get those positives as well too. So the world in which, if we do really fall behind here, which is quite frankly a good possibility, it's not outside the realm of what's possible. We could see AI, basically a whole new internet built around the communist regime, censorship, surveillance, which shape what billions of people see, ask, and believe. That's a little concerning to me. I think that it should be to everyone to some extent. So, like I said, this isn't the case for why we have to do it here. But if we can thread this needle correctly, and I think we're well on our way, we can get some really big benefits and we can give America a cutting edge. Where does this leave us? Data centers have the potential to unlock huge opportunities for Montana, but it's not all sunshine and rainbows. Nothing ever is. Every industry that's ever come to Montana or started here or grew here has had externalities. They've faced hard times. It's been ups and downs. But we should address those. We should address the downsides of data centers or AI for that matter in a way that doesn't destroy the positives. Luckily, as many of the other presentations have pointed out, we're well ahead of the curve. We have states pointing to our laws on the books and saying, how do we do what they did to protect ratepayers? I think it's a beautiful thing. I think we're well on our way. So with that, that's kind of my presentation. I'd be love to unpack some things or answer any questions. I know the think tank world is super high level. It's kind of how do we tie this down to concrete things? So I'd be happy to discuss this as much as you guys want.
That was great, Tanner. And one of the things that I really appreciate you pointing out here in your presentation that I've been talking about is that you made the point like we need to address the negatives as problems to solve. I think we're here in Montana. I think we're in a bit of a unique situation. Is that it's the 1st of June. We have a legislative session starting the 1st of January, and so as we go down this road and we start seeing some of the opportunities and potentially some of the threats that come with a big kind of data center sort of build out in Montana, it also gives us an opportunity to see if there are gaps in our regulatory permitting sort of regime and how can we address those? What sort of things should we be doing come January that we can put on the books if we identify some of those gaps? And so I've been very open-minded about this whole process as we've gone down this road. It's like let's look for some of those negatives and let's find the solutions to those sort of problems and see if we can address it.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's been fun, talking with communities, talking with legislators, especially the governor's office as well. Everyone, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or a Libertarian or somewhere in between, we all want to make sure we get this right. And so I think the momentum for us addressing any of these concerns is definitely there.